Hello, hello. Sorry for being a little bit late. Let me clean my screen real quick. Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Wait 1 second. Um, sharing that. I'll share the link in the screen as or in the chat, sorry. So please somebody get a chance after I set everything up here. Yeah, let's do this. Just copy all this. Ninth. This is Europe, Asia. I think we just did. Yeah. Go. So, all right. So let's get started then. So I want to kind of talk about this particular GitHub issue, if I can bring it up again. Where is it? Wait, am I in the wrong one? No, no, I am in the right one. All right, GitHub issue. More GitOps is removing. I'll just find it here. Hub.com, CDEvents, spec. We're going to talk about the removal build event because I did spend some time thinking about it, David. And so here's what I kind of landed on is build is a critical event in the SDLC lifecycle. And the issue that we're seeing, as you kind of said last time in the last meeting, was that tools have their own definitions, right? And while that is true, when tools are sending CD events, they need to conform to our semantics. So we need to come up with a good build definition. And so I spent some time and I created a internal page currently here at Apple that defines at least just build for now to kind of get the process starting. So I'll have a PR out later. I just want to get a few eyes internally first before I send it out. Um, but the idea is that a build is anything that it can transform code, it can build a executable artifact, it can transform a config, for example, build a config. So it's very specific. It has tables and examples of what is and isn't a build. So it should hopefully make that more clear. So I think we can keep the build subject and just do a better job of defining. So what I think the goal is I'm going to have this live kind of next to the CDEvents primer. So we have this link here and we have this primer, which should house like everything, documentation, which should house like, definition, associated concepts like it says, but it doesn't really define anything inside of the SDLC. It kind of all stays within like CDEvents itself, right? Which is fine, but in terms of interoperability, it doesn't really solve that issue, right? Because we have to make sure that everyone, or we need to come up with a definition that is is opinionated so people can follow it and people not having or tools not having their own semantics, because once tools start having their own semantics, it makes things very, very difficult. Actually, I would say impossible to be interoperable. So So I just wanted to let you know, David, that that PR is coming. So I'll ping you directly. So if you have any issues with the definition, or if you want to add examples, or you think an example doesn't look right, we can go ahead and fix that. If does that make sense, David?
Yes, just while I raise also this issue, it's how to map existing code and system to those events to be able to consume them. And because you also mentioned that the purpose is the creation of an artifact. And for this specific case, we have artifact package. For the subject artifact, we have
Yeah,
the
but isn't
package
that for when
subject.
you package an artifact to go into an artifactory?
Yeah, yeah, that's how and like I said, that goes back to the definitions, right? So
Right,
I agree with the DC. So we just need to be clear on what those definitions are. Like I don't see packaged as build. Like packaged
right.
is a very different thing. That's like bundling things together to be like sent off to a storage, basically. That's how I took
No,
it.
in this case, it's published because when you store into an
Yeah, the
artifact
bundling,
artifactory,
but the bundling aspect is packaging, right?
yes, without
Yeah,
store.
so yeah. So if you could look, so I sorry, I don't have my definition right now because it's still internal, but the definition that I laid out also says that copying things from one place to another is not a build. So that's what this would constitute. It's not a build. It's a bundle, it's a package.
I think there's I I think I now understand what some of the confusion is. I think that was what I just in reading the way that Andrea had written this to me, it didn't click at all like why this was there. But yeah, I think that the concept of things we do with the physical artifact from the artifactory side might need to be clearly defined as well, because the concept of build is something that is almost like ubiquitous. It's universal, and so systems having multiple ways to do that actually makes sense. But what we're trying to do from an interoperability standpoint, and the thing that you'll find that is repeatable about the process is that how people do the build from system to system for the same set of codes and purposes will remain the same. And that's where the interoperability piece comes in, because we really just need for the build sake to say, hey, I'm beginning a build, but then what makes that a build? It's like you produce an artifact and that artifact has a location. But it doesn't necessarily, to Ben's point to a packaging of a thing. Um, and it is a very flexible and wide term. So yeah, I'm as well of the mindset that for the purposes of interoperability and expansion and mapping these concepts to LLMs, that we need to be really clear about intent along the way, and that's going to be our key separator industry wide. And the concept of build is needs to be held onto for those kind of purposes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Does that make sense, David?
Yeah, about the concept, yes, I fully agree. Just it's now it's how to automate the creation and the mapping and the packaging with existing system because this concept doesn't exist yet into
Yeah.
existing system. So it means that to have it in existing system, it means that we user will have to create some kind of um, uh, ad hoc because between one task that is not a build, a task that run a test, and a task that build, you have to manually set, oh, this task is run a test, this task is a build, and what is build? But because we could say a test result is the output of a build. An artifact is the output of the build. So it's need
Yeah, I think
clarification.
again, yeah, we need to be really strict with the definitions. And that's the purpose of the group, right? And again, I agree exactly with what you're saying, David. You do need to be strict about what that process is, but it also needs to have some flexibility that it's a bound process. I mean, even doing something as simple as saying, hey, you're going to start a pipeline, you're going to begin a build process as a declaration and then having a set of steps to say, okay, that's your build process. That's the unknown that changes system to system. And then having an ending process to say, I'm declaring that I'm ending this build state, that encapsulate what the build is, and then any of those events in there become a part of that syntax in the declared section. So I get that we need to work on better definitions. That's part of what we're trying to do in the work to actually map and lay some of this out from an interoperability standpoint, is to give them clear definitions for what the workflow segments actually are and what they mean. And without that piece, and again, this is me agreeing with you 200%, without the piece saying this is how these things come together to form a concept, we can't have interoperability. But then we can still do that if we frame that in the right flexibility. I
Yeah,
hope
and
I'm being clear.
In
oh,
this case, because it's more high level, high level concept, maybe build by itself will be more suited into suite and English. Maybe a best definition place for build as a concept will be in conduit instead of CDEvents. No,
no, disagree.
no. Okay.
Yeah, because when you think about the SDLC lifecycle, I'm kind of steal DC's like concept here, his philosophy is it's build, test, store. That's all the SDLC is doing, right? And so build is a core piece in any SDLC flow, and CD events needs to map that. Um, so so I think what I'm hearing, Dave, and I understand what the issue is because you're trying to build something and we don't really have definitions. So you're trying to figure out how to use these definitions with what you have and what these pre-existing tools are. However, we need to first make the definition. So, like I said, I'll get out build and I'll try to get as many as done as possible. But I'm pretty swamped, and I'm managing both of these groups at this point. Like I'm doing the Europe one as well as the America one. So I'm already like really booked. But I'll try to get the definitions out one at a time. But David, if you have an opinionated definition of something, feel free to add to that page as well. Because I'd rather have this be a group effort than just me, to be honest,
Yeah.
and like it would help
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I'm gonna start with build. I'll try to get that PR out today. But I'll just need to see how what that looks like internally. I'll try to get the PR out today, and then if we can get more people adding PRs to kind of like discuss what these concepts and what these definitions are, then that will only be helpful, not only to me, but to everyone. Because, if I'm the only one making these definitions, right, like I might not see something that you might see, Dave, especially with you so deep in the tooling, that it might add some clarity. Because, I'm coming at this more from just like a very like theoretical standpoint of like how, like how can we make interoperability work? But with you implementing it, you have definitely a different side of the view here. So I definitely want to leverage that. So yeah, I think that is probably the next step is rather than removing build. So let me know if you're okay with this, David, is that we define the set of core concepts as well as events. Another problem is that we have, like if we go, I'll give you an example. If we go to github.com, right, and go to CDEvents spec, right, and then we go to let's go to just CI, for example, and we go to build, right? The definition is just a build is a process uses a recipe to produce an artifact from source code, right? So it doesn't really give too much context there. It doesn't really say what a recipe is. It doesn't really constitute what an artifact is. And we all know what source code is, but we need to make sure that we are, defining these nouns to make sure that anyone that's reading this, whether they are completely new to software and completely new to the CI/CD space, completely new to CDEvents, understands what we are talking about. Once we have that foundation laid out, it allows us to build the tooling that you need, David. But not to say that you have to halt like what you're building right now, but what we can do is when you're starting to think of a definition, you can just ping us on Slack. We could talk about it there and then come up with a definition. It might change a little bit when we get to the PR, but it won't change that much, hopefully, right? If we have a good enough discussion. So I think that's probably the best path for you, David, but also a best path for CD events is to start laying out what these concepts mean. And again, I'm going to start with just build right now, and then we'll just kind of iterate on that process. I'll try to get, a couple done here and there.
Yeah, and one other thing I want to add, guys, is like conduit is just really the framework, not necessarily the machine itself. So everything has to be in the specification. This has to be duplicatable for anyone who's approaching the problem from an open source standpoint. It's not us making some sort of locked in machine, which you know, just replaces vendor sets. The purpose is to like free people or make an open IDP kind of system. And so having my intent had always been to have CD events define that interoperability so it's repeatable. I think that having this opportunity to really say, okay, let's evaluate the events that are there and how we're putting it together to make a build concept is the right step. And that's what we're talking about doing. And that's part of what I've been trying to do and getting people together to say, hey, look at, these standardizations and what we want to do with the standard data that comes out of the events. But how we map the events together to say that this is a process is the workflow segment part. And so this is literally us as a group saying, hey, these are the steps that make build, or this is the process that make build, and the intent and really clearly defining that. So this is a wonderful first step overall to have that communication work as a group and get that bound and done.
Cool. Does that sound like something that you're okay with David, like moving forward with? I mean, like I said, because
Yes,
like you're
yes.
coming, okay, awesome, awesome. And then I just wanted to call out too, thank you again for working with me with the whole licensing thing, because that was definitely an interesting conversation. So because one, I'm not a lawyer, I don't really know law like at all. And so like it was good, kind of getting having you be so flexible and working with us makes it a lot easier to handle. Um, and then another thing too, Dave, were you going to demo your tool in the Americas, or because I responded to you but never responded back, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, I propose in America's
Awesome,
schedule
awesome.
because, but I need to have the exact hours because I don't have the invitation. So it
Oh, okay. It's 12 o'clock CST, which is it's
12
yeah,
CST. Okay.
so it's 3 hours from when we started this meeting. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So that's when that is. And then I'll probably have quite a bit of questions, but I'm really excited to see what this tool
But
does.
if in the conversation, if you can just send me the link or the invitation, because as I mentioned on the community page,
Let's see.
the CDEvents community repository, sorry, the information are a bit outdated
Oh,
because
right, right. Yeah, I need to do that. Like, thank you for calling that out. That actually slipped my mind. I was actually planning on do that. But you're talking about in the actual repos. I didn't update the links to the meetings, is what you're
not
saying.
on this one, but the community repository under
Yeah,
CDEvent.
yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and update that. But yeah, if you go to just let me find the
Okay,
calendar
this one.
here. Calendar. Where's the calendar not in here? Here it is. And then yeah, if you just go to the calendar, it'll be here, right there. So I'll copy and paste this also into the chat. We have that. So yeah, so that is and I'll have those PRs updated actually right after this meeting as well. So those will be updated. Okay,
Okay,
awesome.
thank you.
So yep. And then let me put that here. Update uh meeting times and repos. Community. Okay, and then that'll be me. Okay. And then also for 0 0.5, let me bring out this list. So we have just a few items remaining. We have just 3 items, um, which I need to ping Andrea about this one. And then actually this item is going to be crossed out mostly because we're going to keep build, but it does go back to this one where it acts. because everything starts with like pipeline or ends in pipeline run, task run, test suite run, etc. Build is the only one that doesn't have that. And the argument was that build can be looked at as already as a verb as opposed to like pipeline or tasks. That's why it was done that way. I'm okay with keeping build as build just to kind of close that out. And I think no one would care about having build run versus build. I don't think that's too big of an issue. But if you are opinionated on having run attached to it, let me know. But I don't see it as too big of an issue. Okay, so with that said, we can close out. But oh, dude, what just happened? Okay. So let's go back. So we'll close out both of those issues. So we just have these last two issues, which is the alignment of ID and context type, which is what you were talking about, just having that consistency, David. This also needs to be done. The only part that sucks about this is just updating all the conformance tests. And then, yeah, it's just that's kind of the biggest issue. But yeah, you're right, though, is that some of them are actually separated and others aren't. So we just need to make that more consistent and fix that. So yeah, I'll take some time doing that. Also this week, maybe this week, might be potentially next week. But with that said, we should have both of these closed out by next week. And if I'll ping Andrea, and if he's unable to do that, then I can do it. Or if you can take it, David, that might be an option as well. But let me just link it so we can actually see it. So this one is just renaming version to spec version. And me and Luke actually talked about this in the last Americas SIG group, is that he thinks that spec version is a little bit more clear. And actually, as I was talking with him, because he's working on the Argo portion of CDEvents, like getting it implemented there, he was really confused on what version was, like the two versions, and he didn't know like what they meant. So it just kind of helps illustrate that having the two versions is very confusing. And we need to do a better job again, saying like what these actual fields are. And maybe giving some examples on like how they're used versus like, and what they mean can help people understand like the semantics of these as well. So yeah, so he was in agreement renaming this to spec version to make it very, very clear. So like I said, this is a simple like sed. I could just literally do a sed command and it would fix like all this all at once. And I could have that done like this week. So I'll ping Andrea again. And if he is unable to do that, I can do it. Talk this. So is there anyone against naming this Sig regions? Decided to go with. Okay, so I'll go ahead and comment that. And I'll ping Andrea on that issue. And then we should be able to have these two done by next week. And then we could do the release for 0.5. So look for the release for 0.5 come next week is the goal. So yeah. So with that said, that's all I had on my agenda. If anyone had any other topics, please let me know. Otherwise, we can end early. All right, cool. Well, thank you, everyone.
Actually, all
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
So, yeah, just as we chat on the Slack. So I think it will be interesting to extend the events into DataOps field. So I shared some of the information regarding what's happening in the DataOps community. So so at this point it's still early. We're still going through the phase of defining what is DataOps. So there's a lot of work to be done before we can even ready for the event stage. But what do you think based on what I provided? What's your suggestion on what should we do next to get to
the
that
process.
stage?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is something we also need a contribution guide. Okay, I'll create a GitHub issue for that. But yeah, so you're right, Victor. Actually, DC had the same exact question. So this shows that this is an issue that we need to be more clear on what the process is. So basically, the gist of it is we start with a GitHub issue. So in this case, it could be something like, introduce or have data ops in CD events, or have data ops as a CD event. And then the primary thing is talking about the use cases and how it could help CD events accomplish its goals, which is like interoperability, observability being a side goal, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of like number one, is creating the GitHub issue to kind of help get us familiar with it. And it allows us to have like an async conversation about it. And once we establish the use cases, we can start thinking about an actual proposal, like what is the criteria and et cetera, like what type of event subjects, or what the subject is, what are the predicates, and then we start thinking about that. And then, oh yeah, did you see?
Um, Yeah, so the one thing I did want to call out while you're talking about this, because this is literally what we were just saying when we were talking to David about build. Part of the challenge is understanding what the tools that are involved do and the steps that they take to orchestrate something versus the actual concept of, the mental concept of what is data ops. And so the challenge that you're going to have, Victor, is to say, okay, this machine does a thing that, whatever the process is of building, testing, or storing that it's going through, it's doing that as part of the SDLC process. But from a concept level, from a data ops perspective, this means something intent-wise to the people that do it. So when you are saying, hey, you're doing XYZ, the other data ops people know exactly what that concept means. And it's marrying those two things together that gives us the ability to build interoperable concepts. When I started designing the idea of CD as as a tool-specific interoperable mechanism, my thought was this has to be language. It has to be real language that marries what the tools do with what we as human beings think, so that when we go to put it in an LLM, it kind of structures and kind of pulls itself together, because we're having these sets of steps that can come in many different fashions that still mean the same thing. And the computers need a way to kind of, solve that for a mechanic and say, oh, this is what you meant to do. This is where you're trying to end up. So that was the whole thought process behind how I was trying to solve this problem. I'm thinking, hey, how do we get this to work long term from a data analytics perspective? Um, and how do we structure that with both what the human being is trying to get done and what the machines actually do as orchestrators? So that's my just little tip in how you think through what you're looking at. And then you'll end up in this whole cycle towards the end as you're cleaning up where we are now, where things like artifact have to be rechecked to make sure that we fit those two concepts together with a build process. Does that help?
Oh yeah, definitely. So what we're going to do is, so two things we're actually going to do. One is defining the concepts. Number two is we're also by defining the concept, we come to know like what should be in scope and what's the landscape. Because compared with CD, which is I don't know, maybe it's relatively clear what are the players landscape, but in data ops it's still kind of not completely clear. So that's the second thing we're going to do is defining the landscape of data ops and what tools. Because my understanding, CD event is for interoperability between different CD frameworks, right? So or tool vendors. So same thing for data ops. We need to
Correct.
define like what type of tools that should be in the scope, and then what are the actual players. Yeah, by defining that first, we probably can come back here and discuss next step on
Yes.
what kind of event are needed.
No, that's exactly what I've been asking all of my data ops friends and then when I'm having the conversations, I'm finding like they're thinking of like ML ops as something slightly different, and AI ops is something slightly different. And so, yeah, it's like, what are the tools that come together that make you frame it and say, this is data ops? That is the first step. And like, this is a data ops process to kind of like just make a flow chart of both the systems that you go through and what those concepts mean to you. And then we can look at where, if that intersects at all with regular, I'm sure it intersects with DevOps at some point because that's where all of these SDLC concepts are coming from. But yeah, you are definitely on the right track.
Sounds
I
good.
would like to add, try to see how existing events, etc., can be also reused and mapped to MLOps, DataOps, AIOps. I also practiced those few years ago. And you have where there is already the concept of pipeline task that exists in DataOps. Artifacts can be used for dataset, can be used for model, can be used for existing for stuff. So it try to avoid maybe recreate or duplicate uh, low level stuff. For high level concept, maybe it could be different, but maybe sometimes we could just adapt or complete what exists.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the whole step that is like after you make that chart and say, hey, here's my flow chart, this is the expectation, then we can look at what's already here and say, hey, these same concepts can be reused. Or, in like the case of an artifact, and I think this is such a great example, guys, because an artifact is actually a physical thing where like build and deployments, these are things that you're doing with the thing. And having clear definitions of when to actually start using the artifact event, being that an artifact is an actual thing, maybe that's part of the issue that we need to think about is like, how do we differentiate, a process from something that is produced by the process, from an event standpoint? Is that still an event, or is that literally a physical object that we're carrying around as a result of these events happening? And that the artifact then exists not as an event, but as a instrument or an object that's being moved around. Different events within CDEvents might be another approach. Again, I'm just jumping the gun, but that's a part of that analysis process of like, hey, let's look at what's there. Maybe it can be done better.
Yes, sounds good. Yeah, that one thing that I know this must be probably already discussed already is the API workflows. So yeah, this could definitely be enabling further interesting discussion there. There's actually going to be a data ops initiative meeting tomorrow. I believe it's still on. Yeah, if you, I know it's if you have time, I know you have a lot on plate already, but in case you have time, it's 11 a.m. Eastern tomorrow.
Okay.
By example of something that currently didn't exist in CDEvents and something that I miss a little bit, but it's more important in data flow. It's data lineage, and it means how an artifact was built from the combination of other artifacts, etc. So in data flow, you have a lot of transformation. You say this data set is created from those two, the combination or the transformation of another data set or two other data set, etc. So for traceability, it's something that should be required. And in CDEvents, it's something that currently is missing, but could be useful because when we deploy a service, it is often split between I will say the application, the Docker image, and the configuration used for deployment. On some system, it's two different artifacts that are combined and deployed independently on some, but in reality, they are combined and deployed in one entity. So it's something, today, it's something that you have some difficulty to map. But with data flow and push, I think maybe it's something that could help to have another point of view and to increase the scope.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Actually, I participated in another community. By the way, I'm kind of independents have a lot of time going to different places, and one thing that I participated is called supply chain security in the SPDX community. So there there's going to be a new release that's going to touch. It's going to be knowledge graph based supply chain information. So yeah, so that's one area. Yeah, I feel also interested in is how to track the, as I said, the lineage data, and also maybe the provenance attestation of data. Same thing for software actually for the CD the pipeline as well. How to track the origin and authenticity of artifacts, whether it's a software or even AI model as part of ML ops and data as part of data ops. Yeah, so whether it's David said earlier, whether it's an artifact or it's a direct API call or kind of async events and what kind of event it is. Yeah, all those are still um, to be discovered and discussed, and yeah, that's all interesting stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you again for joining, Victor. And I'm really interested to see what becomes of the data ops initiative. So please keep us in the loop. I'll try to attend the meeting tomorrow, but I can't promise you, but I'll definitely try because I definitely want to hear how you guys are going about reasoning what the definitions may look like. So I think that'll be really, really valuable. But I'll definitely try to attend. But yeah, with that said, is there anything else? If not, we can close early. Okay, sounds like we are good then. All right, well, thank you everyone. Really appreciate it. And I'll look forward to speaking with you all next week.
All right,
Or
thank
in
you.
2 hours.
Or 2 hours. Yes, all right. Bye everyone.
Bye.